years ago, the British realized that they could not win the war with only half of them, the men, helping. When men went off to battle, even from essential jobs on the railroads, women had to take their places. Now, there's nothing ladylike about railroading. Its uniform is greasy dungarees. It offers soot and long hours, clatter and exhaustion, because every train and workshop and every mile of track is a valuable bomb hit. Railroad work is dangerous, too. But 160,000 women are working now on British railways, from quiet side street houses, from colleges, cafes, and offices. They volunteered to help transport bundles for Berlin. It's no glamour job, but especially on the Southern Railway, the line that covers the coast zone nearest France, it is essential to the Battle of Europe. Mrs. Lewis, who used to teach music in a school, has one of the Southern Railway's pleasanter jobs. She merely stands on her feet 9 hours a day in all kinds of weather, waving traffic into Waterloo Station in London. In porters' jobs, women have replaced all but the most dilapidated men. At Waterloo Station, Mrs. Ellen Driver, around there they call her Blondie, works in the spring sunshine of 1943. But she also worked there in the fearsome nights of 1940. Her husband is one of General Montgomery's men. In spite of bombs and extra munition trains, porters have to get the mails out on time. Gladys Sharp, who opened the gate, used to cook in a canteen. Another of this gang was a stewardess on a hospital ship until the Germans sank it. Another was a bridge-playing girl of leisure. With half of Britain's population and all the boys from other countries catching trains they never used before, there are endless opportunities for unintentional journeys. It is a woman's voice. This one belongs to the wife of an RAF officer, which helps travelers over the loudspeakers.
Fast train to Victoria from platform 5, calling at Preston Park, Haywards Heath, Gatwick Airport, Red Hill, East Croydon, Clapham Junction and Victoria. Hurry along there, please, for the Victoria train.
It's no pushover being the automaton behind the ticket window, but hundreds of women do that job for the Southern Railway. That's Delsey Warner. She worked before the war in a theater box office. Now she has to remember such helpful details as that there are 5 towns called Newport in the country. On most British trains, conductors don't attempt to get from one to another of the fuddy-duddy little carriages. Passengers hang on to their tickets until they get where they're going. And it's up to the collector at the gates to see, even in rush hours, that nobody gets through without turning in his pasteboard. This woman works 56 hours a week on 8-hour shifts and likes the job. She did the same thing last war. Those are the velvety jobs, but they use only a fraction of the new railroad hands. The rest of them work not with the public, but backstage, helping to move things, including dangerous things for Germany. Here at one London freight depot, 600 of the 1,600 workers are women. They do all sorts of jobs. Hi, remember those? All the freight isn't as precious as that. These gals don't pretend to be Amazons. They carry compacts in their pants pockets. From the freight depots, women go out on delivery trucks, taking personal packages to a couple of hundred front doors in one day, helping the driver carry the heavier bundles. The boys who used to do this travel now in tanks, warships, and fighter planes. One of the simpler but less alluring jobs in the company's workshops is welding parts of cars. It's noisy and hard on the eyes, but girls who never learned to sew now make neat seams in steel. Multiple drilling was nerve-wracking for Mrs. Bailey and Mrs. Dixon there until they learned to work like robots in the rhythm of their machines. Mrs. Phyllis Bowyer, whose husband was lost at sea, is one of the company's saw sharpeners. She grinds 30 saws a day, works in a small frenzy as though each sawtooth is going to bite right into the enemy. Some of the tools, this is a milling machine, make gears, and this radial driller and its operator, Mrs. Ruby Shelley, help make other parts of engines. It takes special skill to do the 6 or 8 operations of a capstan lathe, making bolts, rivets, or copper stays for locomotives. Like other women in this shop, Mrs. Annetts learned her job at a government training school. She is working on a rush order for freight cars for Iran, which will carry supplies to Russia. The rivets this girl is making are going to Iran, too, in the 1,000 freight cars the Southern Railway is sending there. The British fasten their rails to the ties by a special contraption they call a chair. These women are driving bolts into the ties to hold the chairs. Sarah Smith never developed such energy in peacetime when she was a housemaid. Some of the new hands do engine repairs. For instance, welding new ends on boiler tubes, which wear out quickly. She does it with electricity and learns to handle a tube as easily as a schoolroom pointer stick she used to wield. Here is a modern pioneer. She is one of the Stanford Beale twins who both work now for the Southern Railway. This twin, who was the first girl in the company to become a blacksmith, was making links for chains when the camera called on her. Before the war, she worked in a greengrocer's store, selling cabbages and oranges. Doris Baker, there behind the wheel, is 19, and the sort of child who in peacetime would be a favorite of the stag lines at school dances. Now she drives a 2-ton gas truck. The British have found that women make diligent and careful inspectors of their factory output. This is Mrs. Gertrude Murrell, whose husband is away in the army, checking gauges to the 1,000th part of an inch. No woman in Britain ever did this lumberjack's job before. They are stripping the bark from trees which will be telegraph poles. On biting winter mornings, it's no picnic working outdoors like this, but most of this crew say they are healthier than when they stayed comfortably at home. One of them is Mrs. May Ward, whose husband was in His Majesty's submarine Swordfish. Then she got one of those dreaded yellow telegrams. The Admiralty regrets to inform you. In a town in western England, the company has its concrete factory, which turns out 100,000 items a year. About half the employees are women who have taken over men's jobs, preparing wire to reinforce concrete, making fence posts, cable troughing and covers, and parts of trestles and coal pens. The girl on the left used to be a hairdresser, and the one next to her got a job when her husband was in the siege of Tobruk. This is just another routine job of greasing the wheels that carry materials to the Battle of Europe. Rain gets in the axle boxes, so she has to pump it out first. Nowadays, they check the oil level with a gauge, because with oil, it's not only smart, it's essential to be thrifty. Not exactly picturesque, this gang, but they weren't hired as mannequins. Beneath their sling, there is only the River Thames. But their gossip as they work, of where to buy fish, which is unrationed but rare, of what's happening to sons and husbands in India and Africa, is just as cozy as it used to be across their backyard fences. Only a few years ago, British women, seeing films of Russian women laboring in the fields, thanked their stars they lived in conventional old England. But bombs blasted away that convention. Now they toil and sweat, digging trenches for electric power cables. One of these women lost a husband in the last war and a son in this one. She said, "It'll take all of us to beat them Jerrys. That's why I'm working like this." Mrs. Violet Winborn, a London girl with a husband and 4 brothers on the war fronts, carries out the same idea from the driver's seat of a 5-ton electric crane. Her only other job, which she had before she was married, was managing a bakery. These days, she parks her daughter, aged 4, in one of Britain's new wartime day nurseries on her way to work. and collects the baby again on her way home at night. Crane driving, 45 feet in the air, was Mr. Wenborn's job before he went into the Army. Mrs. Wenborn asked for it and qualified for it in 3 weeks. Nobody on the railroads could have been persuaded before the war that women could work on tops of cars or of these boxes. The British call them containers. They fit on both road trucks and flat cars and carry furniture and now more dangerous cargo intact from door to door. Now nobody pretends that women can't do these jobs. When the containers hold live ammunition, there can't be any doubts about the holding power of a knot. There you have them, Britain's new railroad hands, helping humbly, without glamour or glory, to move the Allies' generous big bundles for Berlin. Don't pity them, these backstage workers. Salute their grime and din and hardship, because one day they will rank among the winners